Hello there, my fellow designers. This is Sam from D-Life HD. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Little Nightmares 2, which recently released for the Nintendo Switch, as well as the PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. Now, you may have played it yourself by now, but if you haven't, stick around because this will be a spoiler-free review, where we'll be giving our thoughts on the game, as well as how it runs on the Switch specifically. Alright, without further ado, let's get right into it.
Switch it up. Switch it up. I was a worker, had to upgrade to a boss. Switch it up. Used to live in the hood, but had to upgrade to a loft. Switch it up.
Now, I'm going to come out and say this. I just finished the game, and so this review is going to be a little bit off the cuff, a little bit raw, because the game made me feel some type of way that I can only capture, I think, by going into this directly after beating the game. I'll start off by saying Little Nightmares might as well have been called Big Headache, because that's what it gave me trying to complete it. But I'll dive into each topic specifically. We're going to be going into the game modes, the UI and graphics, the controls and gameplay, the music and sound, the story, and then wrap it all up at the end with our final thoughts. Now, let's start with game modes. This game is pretty simple. It has one mode, and that is the story. You'll be playing a single-player adventure, and there's no options for co-op, although it was rumored at one time. There are two characters primarily throughout the game, but you'll only be playing single-player, unfortunately. There's also an additional DLC level that you can access, but I won't be going into that since it's not part of the base game. Now, moving on to the UI and graphics. There's not a lot of UI actually. The game is focused on a cinematic storytelling, so there's no UI on screen while you're playing, other than occasional hints that will pop up to teach you the controls if you seem to be taking a while to figure them out. The graphics are one of the best parts of the game. It's absolutely beautiful to look at, and the lighting especially is a big highlight. If you've ever seen a Tim Burton movie such as The Nightmare Before Christmas, it's a very similar feeling here. There's a lot of wacky characters, creepy scenarios, and just all kinds of madness that you wouldn't see in the real world. It kind of reminded me of a Studio Ghibli movie as well in some ways, such as Spirited Away. Just all of the fantastical, crazy creatures. But unlike Spirited Away, which is a pretty fun movie, this game is not afraid to live up to its name. It's very creepy, even more so than the first game. So be aware of that before you go into it. I thought this game was rated E10 when I started it, and there started to be some things that were so creepy, I was like, wait, this is E10? Only to find out, oh no, it's actually rated T, so it actually pushes the envelope of what I think can be in a T game. Although, it does hold back. And what makes it very creepy is that a lot of times it simply suggests something horrific happening off screen or shows you something in a way that is not creepy when you think about it, but it still just makes you feel creeped out. Like a mannequin getting its head knocked off, for instance. It's just a mannequin, so it's not that violent, but it's still getting its head knocked off, so it's kind of freaky. You'll have to play the game to be able to see exactly what I mean, but I hope that gives you a picture of what I'm trying to say. Now, I want to talk about the Switch version specifically here, because the graphics do suffer a little bit compared to its bigger brother consoles, or PC. I played on the Xbox One as well as the Switch, and there is a considerable jump, even just going from Switch to Xbox One. And if you're playing on one of the new consoles like PS5 or the Series X, you're definitely going to see a huge spike in quality. And I will say, while the graphics themselves aren't super important, one thing that is important is the lighting. This game is very dark, and so something like HDR, which allows for a much greater contrast between darks, is very valuable and cannot be found on the Nintendo Switch version. Now, I did play the game in every possible scenario. I played it in handheld, I played it on my 1080p monitor, and I played it upscaled on my 4K TV. And I will say, playing it on the TV was definitely the best. There was some automated upscaling that allowed for me to enjoy the game a little bit more. Playing it in handheld was not a fun experience for more than one reason, but regarding the graphics, playing it in handheld was not optimal due to the fact that the sound needs to be heard, and so you'll need to wear headphones, and also it's a very dark game like I mentioned before, so even in a dark room, you'll want to have the brightness cranked way up. So I don't recommend playing in handheld, and considering that's one of the biggest draws of the Switch, I would say if the graphics are the most important thing to you and you have another console available, go ahead and pick it up on those, because you're not doing yourself any favors by picking it up on the weaker console. However, if you are stuck playing on the Switch and that's your only console, it's fine. You'll be able to get through the game. Just know that there are some visual cues for traps and little textures that add to the story, and you might be missing out on those and find yourself a little bit frustrated. But that's about the only drawback there. Now, moving on to controls and gameplay. Oh boy, this is where I'm going to probably be harder on this game than a lot of people, so if you don't want to hear me, quote, complain for the next few minutes, well, you might want to skip ahead. Because this game gave me so much anxiety. I don't think I've ever come as close as I did to smashing my TV while I was playing it as I did in this game. The controls are strange. For instance, there's a button that you have to hold down to pick things up, grab ledges, or climb ladders, and it feels very unnatural. I mean, normally you walk up to a ladder in a game and you start climbing it. Normally you walk up to an item and you just pick it up. It would make sense if you had to press a button to pick the item up, but holding a button down to pick the item up is a little bit awkward. There's also a run button, a jump button, and the grab button. And so when you're trying to do tricky platforming sections, running, grabbing ledges, pulling yourself up, all while being chased by some horrific monstrosity in a very, very dark background, making it hard to gauge your jumps very well, it can all come together to be a pretty frustrating experience. On top of that, unfortunately, the game seems like it was rushed out the door just a bit early, which I found to be the case with the first game as well. There are so many glitches. So many glitches. I kept finding my character getting stuck in items, caught on invisible barriers, and it led to my death so many times. Another thing is, in the first game, whenever you died, there was a lengthy, and I mean lengthy load time between your deaths. It made such a frustrating experience. However, in this game, the game loads up very quickly, and so you'll find yourself dying and being able to restart in just a couple of seconds. However, I do think this came at a cost, because a lot of times when you load back into a level, you'll see assets popping in, glitching in, textures loading in, and so at the cost of some graphical fidelity, you do get to get into the action faster, but it takes away from the beautiful graphics and it takes away from the horror of it all, because you feel way less immersed whenever there's clipping or glitching or loading textures. So I will make you aware of that. Now, another thing that made me frustrated, and this is probably my peak frustration of this, like my top example, is there was a puzzle that was very simple, and this game is based mostly around puzzles, so I kept trying to figure out the answer. And if you know me, you know I hate looking things up. I absolutely hate looking things up. But I kept trying to find the answer. I kept going and starting and trying and doing everything I could to figure this puzzle out, and eventually I just said, I'm stumped. The logical answer here is not the solution, so I don't know what to do. So I looked it up because I needed to finish the game for this review. When I looked it up, I found that the answer was exactly what I had been doing. I tried it again, didn't work. So I turned off the Switch, turned it back on, rebooted the game, and the solution worked itself out instantly. Yes, the game was simply glitching, and I wasted 40 minutes on one puzzle that should have taken 40 seconds because I had the solution right from the very beginning. That made me want to drop the game. And if I wasn't reviewing it, I'm not gonna lie to you, I probably would have just uninstalled it and not finished it. And considering this game can be beaten in about 5 hours, yeah, That's not good. Now, the first 2 levels were very enjoyable, so I will give them props for that. The final level was also enjoyable, but I would say that the 3rd and 4th levels are just full of cheap deaths, and you're going to find yourself very frustrated. Because in addition to all of that, another thing that makes the controlling and the gameplay really frustrating is that your characters control very awkwardly, and the environment tends to be not very coherent. Things don't exactly work the same one time to the next. And so you'll find yourself needing to make precise aims, and the controls won't be working with you. They won't agree with you. You'll need to make a jump, and you'll be used to a game where pressing a button at the precise moment you're at the edge of a platform gives you the jump. But in this game, there's a little bit of a delay to everything you do, and so you're going to need to learn this awkward timing to press the button well before you actually need to make the jump in order to make the jump. And the game gives you no grace. You absolutely need to make these perfect jumps in order to save yourself. And then if you forget to hold down the grab button, you won't grab the ledge, you'll fall off and have to start all the way over. You'll end up being so frustrated. One of my peak frustrating moments that felt like it was just not my fault, that is in addition to the whole puzzle that wouldn't work scenario, was, I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say there's an area where you have to do a flashlight puzzle that's similar to like Mario Brothers when a boo is coming after you and you look at the boo to make it freeze and then you turn away. Well, in this part, you have to use the flashlight to stun enemies that will be chasing you unless you're stunning them. The only problem is, aiming the flashlight is virtually impossible. And the controls for the flashlight change dependent on whether you're being chased or not. So if you're just walking around, the flashlight controls are completely different than if you're being chased, which means there's no way that you can learn the controls to the flashlight outside of one of those chase scenarios to take that knowledge into the chase. You have to figure it out on the fly, which is going to lead to countless deaths. Now, I will give you a little piece of advice for free here. I figured out that if you just slowly rotate the joystick, the right joystick to aim the flashlight, while you move yourself with the left joystick, that's going to be your best bet, because you'll be spinning the flashlight around in every direction. Instead of having to try to precisely aim it, you'll stun every enemy, and you can just walk on past. Now that feels like a little bit of a cheap tactic, and I wish I hadn't have had to use it to get through these areas, but it's just what you got to do in this game. It doesn't work with you, you got to work against it. Now there are a lot of games that have cheap deaths and difficult parts, and I would name Celeste, for instance, is a platformer with a lot of difficult segments. But the thing Celeste does is it has consistent movement and it has very fast restarts. And you're not going to find that here. You're going to find that you're getting... you're just constantly dying. Even though the same trick you used worked before, it won't work this time for some reason. And then you'll also find that even though the reloads are faster this time, you still have to sit there and watch a little animation while your guy stands up, and that is a headache. Okay, final thing, and I'm almost done complaining about gameplay. I'm almost done, so just bear with me. The final thing is there are so many instances where it'll transition seamlessly from gameplay to cutscene, only to transition back to gameplay without you really knowing, and then you'll die because you were supposed to do something. I can't tell you how many times this happened, but the game has a lot of quick time events per se, and these QTEs never have a display on screen. So you'll need to push the stick in one direction or something, and you'll think you're watching a cutscene, and then you'll die. And then the cutscene will start again, and you'll need to push the stick, and you just have to figure this out. And you're just going to watch these same cutscenes over and over and over. And a lot of times they're pretty long because this game moves at a glacial pace. And so, anyway, just always be moving that stick around during cutscenes because you never know when it's going to switch back into gameplay. Alright, I think I'm done ranting about the gameplay. I will say, there were a lot of fun puzzles. That was a great part. There were some really fun chase sequences, and there were some absolutely horrifying enemies to escape. And so, as far as all that goes, you will enjoy yourself, but you just will find yourself pretty frustrated even if you are an extremely patient gamer, which I consider myself to be. Now, let's go on to the last element, story. The story is one of the greatest elements of this game. In fact, part of me wishes they had just made this a movie or something like that, because the gameplay is not even as good as the story. If they had just taken the beautiful graphics, the great music, and the story and combined them all into one thing, I feel like that would have been a lot better. Now, the story is really great, but I'm not going to spoil it for you, so I can't say much, but it does connect to the first game, I will say that, and you're definitely going to find yourself looking up videos and articles to explain the story and theories and all kinds of things, because this game does a lot to give you just so many fun little lore tidbits. And not only that, but when you complete it and you go back right from the very beginning of the game, you'll start noticing little Easter eggs that are only going to make sense when you've played the game before, so it's definitely worth a replay. Now, I accidentally skipped this category, but I'm going to go back to it. Music and sound. What can I say about these? They're perfect. The music is beautiful, and there are themes that recur that also add to the lore. So you'll hear a theme and then you'll hear it again later and it's saying, hey, remember that part from earlier? Well, it's going to be important again. Music's great. Sound design is absolutely amazing. I mean, the enemies sound creepy. The footsteps sound kind of cute. Little characters running around just pattering. Raindrops, TV static, all kinds of great sounds. So this is one game I recommend you either have a good sound system or you put a pair of headphones on. I played it with headphones on in handheld, and I played it with my sound bar on my TV, and either way I thought it was a great experience. So yeah, just make sure you have that sound pumped up. Don't play it with the sound off, because you're going to be missing out on one of the best parts. And with all that said, I'm going to give this my final rating. Now, I'm not going to use a number system here. I'm just going to go ahead and say, if you have the patience to get through many cheap deaths and you don't think you're going to punch your TV screen, go for it. It's going to be worth it. You're going to enjoy yourself. But I would recommend you wait for a sale, because there's not really $30 worth of content here. Even if you do the 100%, I think it'll only take you about 10 hours to get through. So wait till it goes on sale. Play the demo to see if you like it. And if you don't think you have the patience or the cash, I would recommend you just look up a perfect playthrough, no death run, and just enjoy the story and the graphics, because you won't be missing out on much if you don't really play the game, because really just the presentation is the best part. You might actually enjoy it more that way, because you won't be going through the headache. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and say Little Nightmares 2 is a great game. Just depends on if you're the kind of person for it. But the story is great, and I say it's even better than the first game. Definitely fixed a lot of issues that the first game had, and the story is much more interesting. And I think this series has a lot of potential moving forward. If there's a new one, I'll definitely pick it up, because if they keep up this level of quality in the gameplay department, in the story department and the music, and the graphics, then really all they need to do is work out those bugs with the gameplay, and I think we could have a great game on our hands. But that's going to be all for today, guys. Thanks for watching this review of Little Nightmares. I'm sorry I rambled on for a little while and kind of just off the cuff, but I really just thought that was the only way to cover this, because it left me feeling so weird after it was over. So, thanks for watching, and be sure and check out our other videos on the channel. Check out our Twitter if you want gameplay of the latest releases. And remember, guys, always stay one up. We'll see you later.